The studio lights were still warm when the call came in. I wasn't prepared for how a single voice would change everything we thought we knew about one of America's greatest legends. The voice on the other end of the line was breaking, struggling to form words through tears, but there was no mistaking who it was. Rahman Ali, the younger brother of the man once known as the greatest. If this story has already made you feel something, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. I've been keeping this secret for 53 years, Rahman said, his voice barely audible above the static of the phone line. But I can't take it to my grave. People need to know the truth about my brother. The production team exchanged nervous glances. We were recording a documentary series about boxing legends. But this unscheduled call from Muhammad Ali's 79-year-old brother had caught everyone off guard. The rawness in his voice made it clear this wasn't a publicity stunt or a bid for attention. This was a man unburdening his soul. "Take your time, Mr. Ali," I said gently, signaling to the sound engineer to make sure every word was being captured. "We're listening." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of Rahman's labored breathing. When he finally spoke again, his words sent chills through the studio. Muhammad didn't just fight in the ring. There was another battle nobody knew about, a battle that nearly broke him. As Rahman began his story, I found myself transported back to Louisville, Kentucky in the late 1950s. Long before Muhammad Ali became a three-time heavyweight champion. Before he shook up the world by defeating Sonny Liston. Before he sacrificed his title for his principles by refusing the Vietnam draft. Before Parkinson's disease slowly stole his voice and mobility. Back when he was just Cassius Clay, a skinny kid with dreams bigger than the segregated world around him would allow. "We grew up with nothing," Rahman continued, his voice steadying as he delved into the past. "Our father painted billboards for a living, and our mother cleaned white folks' houses. But Muhammad, Cassius back then, he always told me we were going to be somebody. Even when we couldn't eat at the same lunch counters as white kids, even when we had to drink from separate water fountains, he never once doubted himself." Rahman paused, and I could hear him struggling to maintain his composure. But there was one night, January 15th, 1960, that changed everything. Something happened that Muhammad never talked about publicly, not once in all his interviews, not in any of his books. Something that haunted him until the day he died. The studio had fallen completely silent. Even the typically restless camera operators stood frozen, transfixed by Rahman's words. We were walking home from the gym. Muhammad had just won the Golden Gloves tournament, and he was on top of the world. It was dark around 9 o'clock. 3 men approached us on 4th Street, white men. One of them recognized Muhammad from the newspaper. Rahman's voice cracked, and I could hear him take a deep breath before continuing. They said, "You're that nigger boxer who thinks he's better than everyone else." Muhammad tried to defuse the situation. He was always good with words, even then. But these men, they weren't interested in talking. What Rahman described next was a brutal attack. The 3 men cornered the Clay brothers in an alley. While Muhammad fought back valiantly, the odds were against them. One of the men pulled out a knife. "I thought we were going to die that night," Rahman whispered. "But then something happened that I've never been able to explain. Muhammad, he changed. It wasn't just fighting back anymore. It was like something awakened in him, something primal. He fought with such ferocity that those men, grown men, ran away terrified. But not before one of them stabbed Muhammad in the side." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Nothing in the extensive literature about Muhammad Ali ever mentioned a stabbing incident in 1960, 5 years before he became world champion. "We couldn't go to the hospital," Rahman continued. "Not in those days. Not in Louisville. Not for 2 black boys who'd been in a fight with white men. No matter what the truth was, we would have been the ones arrested, so we went to Dr. Porter, a black doctor who treated folks in our neighborhood after hours. According to Rahman, Dr. Porter stitched up the wound in his small basement clinic, warning that the knife had come dangerously close to puncturing Mohammed's lung. If it had been just half an inch deeper, one of the greatest sporting careers in history might have ended before it truly began. That night, while he was lying on that table being stitched up without anesthesia, Mohammed made two promises. First, that he would never tell anyone about what happened because he didn't want to be seen as a victim. And second, that he would become so great, so undeniable, that those men and everyone like them would have to say his name with respect. Rahman's voice had grown stronger as he told the story, as if the act of finally sharing this burden was empowering him. The next morning, he was back at the gym, running with blood still seeping through his bandages, refusing to take even a single day off. I asked him how he could push through that kind of pain. You know what he told me? He said, "I don't count my sit-ups. I only start counting when it starts hurting. That's when I start counting, because that's when it really counts." I recognized the quote. It became one of Ali's most famous. But I'd never known the context behind it, never understood that it wasn't just a clever saying, but a philosophy born from literal blood and pain. That scar stayed with him his whole life, Rahman continued. A 4-inch reminder on his right side. In all those shirtless photos, all those fights, the cameramen were always careful to shoot him from his left side or straight on. The public never saw it, but it was always there, just like the memory. I couldn't help but ask the question that was burning in everyone's mind. Why are you telling us this now, Mr. Ali? After all these years, there was a long pause on the line, because I found something last week when I was going through his personal effects, something I never knew existed, something that changes everything. The recording studio fell into a hush so profound you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Rahman's revelation about the stabbing incident was already monumental, a pivotal moment in Muhammad Ali's life that had remained hidden for over 5 decades. But apparently there was more. After Muhammad passed in 2016, I inherited many of his personal belongings, Rahman continued, his voice now steadier. Most of the valuable items, his championship belts, his Olympic gold medal, his custom-made Rolls-Royce with the GOAT license plate worth over $2 million, those went to his children or to museums. But there were boxes of personal papers that came to me. Rahman explained that he had been slowly working through these materials over the years, organizing them for eventual donation to the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville. Last week, while examining a seemingly ordinary leather-bound journal from 1964, he discovered something extraordinary. The journal itself was one I recognized. Muhammad carried it with him during training for the first Liston fight, but what I didn't know was that between the leather cover and the binding, he had hidden 3 pages of a letter he never sent. According to Rahman, the letter was addressed to the 3 men who had attacked them that night in 1960. Muhammad had somehow learned their identities, but had chosen not to confront them or report them to authorities. The letter begins, "You don't know me, but you tried to end my dream with a knife in an alley 4 years ago." Rahman's voice trembled as he recited his brother's words from memory. "I want you to know that I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because hatred is too heavy a burden to carry to the top of the mountain I intend to climb." I felt goosebumps rise on my arms. The eloquence and magnanimity in those words were quintessentially Ali, even as a young man in his early 20s. But that's not the most shocking part, Rahman continued. The letter reveals that Muhammad had encountered one of these men again. In 1963, just months before he would defeat Sonny Liston for the heavyweight title. According to the letter, Muhammad was dining at an upscale restaurant in Louisville, one that had only recently begun serving black customers, when he recognized one of his attackers working as a bartender. The man, whose name was mentioned in the letter as James Cromwell, didn't recognize the boxer. Muhammad described watching this man mix drinks with the same hands that had once held him down. He wrote about how he considered exposing him, considered demanding justice, but instead did something else entirely. Rahman paused, his breathing heavy with emotion. My brother walked up to the bar, looked the man straight in the eye, and ordered a ginger ale. The man served him, even made small talk, never realizing who he was serving, and Muhammad left him $100 tip, a small fortune in those days, with a note that said, "For a new beginning." The studio remained silent as the weight of this revelation settled over everyone present. This was not just a story about forgiveness. It was a testament to the character of a man who had every right to seek vengeance, but chose a higher path. "There's more," Rahman said. According to the letter, Muhammad hired a private investigator, paid for by his millionaire backer, William Reynolds, who'd invested heavily in his career, to find out what happened to all three men. The investigator discovered that the second attacker, Thomas Weller, had been imprisoned in 1962 for armed robbery. The third, Robert Sanderson, had moved to California. But it was what Muhammad wrote about Cromwell, the bartender, that was most revealing. Muhammad wrote that he returned to that restaurant several times over the next few months, always sitting at the bar, always ordering ginger ale, always leaving an oversized tip with the same message. He never identified himself, never confronted the man about that night in the alley. According to Rahman, the letter described how, on Muhammad's fifth visit, Cromwell finally asked why he was leaving such generous tips. Muhammad wrote, "I told him everyone deserves a chance to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said he wished he could take back the worst thing he'd ever done. I asked what that was, and he described the night he and his friends attacked two young black boys in an alley. He still didn't recognize me, but he confessed his deepest shame to the very person he had harmed." The revelation was stunning. While America was erupting in racial violence, while Muhammad Ali was becoming not just a boxing champion, but a lightning rod for civil rights controversy, he was privately enacting a personal drama of forgiveness and redemption that nobody knew about. "The last paragraph of the letter is what broke me," Rahman said, his voice cracking again. Muhammad wrote, "I never told you my name because I wanted you to see me as a man first, not as the victim of your hatred or as the celebrity I've become. I've carried the physical scar of what you did, but I refused to carry the hatred. That would have made me smaller, and I was born to be great. Consider your debt to me, paid in full." Rahman explained that the letter was signed, but never sent. Muhammad had tucked it away in that journal and apparently never spoken of it again, not even to his brother. "I called the Louisville Public Records Office," Rahman continued. "This James Cromwell died in 1998. He never knew that the young man he tried to destroy with a knife in an alley was the same man who, years later, showed him such inexplicable kindness." The production team exchanged glances, collectively processing the magnitude of this story. This wasn't just a revelation about a physical attack that Ali had survived. It was a window into his soul, into the philosophy that would later make him not just a sports icon, but a global humanitarian. "But there's one more thing," Rahman said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. "Something even I didn't know until I found a second hidden document, a deed to a property in western Louisville." Muhammad had purchased a small building in 1974 during the height of his fame. The building housed a community center for at-risk youth, and the director of that center for 24 years, James Cromwell. The implication was clear and astonishing. Not only had Muhammad Ali forgiven his attacker, but he had secretly provided him with a path to redemption, a way to make amends by serving the very community he had once harmed. The center closed when Cromwell died, Rahman explained. Muhammad never publicly associated himself with it. He funded it through a series of shell companies managed by his millionaire financial advisor, Robert Thurston. The paper trail was deliberately obscured. Nobody ever knew that the man who ran that center had once held Muhammad down while another man plunged a knife into his side. As Rahman shared these details, I couldn't help but think about how this revelation recontextualized so much of what we thought we knew about Muhammad Ali. His famous declaration, "I am the greatest," wasn't just bravado. It was a declaration of triumph over hatred. His refusal to step forward when drafted wasn't just political. It was consistent with a deeply personal moral code that valued redemption over retribution. "My brother wasn't perfect," Rahman said, his voice growing stronger. "He made plenty of mistakes in his life, but this letter shows a side of him that the world never saw, a capacity for forgiveness that went beyond anything I could comprehend. And I think people need to know this story now, when our country is so divided, when hatred seems to be winning." As Rahman's revelation unfolded, none of us realized that this was just the beginning. The story of Muhammad Ali's secret act of forgiveness would soon lead us to an even more shocking discovery, one that would forever change how the world viewed the greatest. 2 days after Rahman's emotional call, our production team gathered at the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville. Rahman had agreed to meet us there with the documents he'd discovered. The center, a 6-story museum and cultural site dedicated to Ali's legacy, stood as a gleaming monument to the boxer's achievements. With its $65 million architecture funded largely by donations from billionaire admirers around the world. "I haven't shown these to anyone else," Rahman said, as we settled into a private conference room. He was older than I'd imagined, his face bearing a faint resemblance to his famous brother, but with a quieter dignity. He carefully opened a leather portfolio and removed several yellowed pages. The letter was exactly as he'd described, written in Muhammad Ali's distinctive handwriting, eloquent and powerful. But there was something else Rahman hadn't mentioned over the phone. Attached to the letter was a black-and-white photograph. "This is the only picture of the scar," Rahman explained, sliding the photo across the table. The image showed a young Muhammad Ali, shirtless in training gear, with a distinctive 4-inch scar visible on his right side. The photograph had clearly been taken for private documentation, not for public consumption. "But there's something else you need to see," Rahman said, pulling out another document. "This is what I found yesterday, after we spoke." It was a letter, dated April 1989, addressed to Muhammad Ali. The letterhead bore the logo of Manhattan General Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical facilities in New York. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at Rahman. "What does this have to do with the story?" Rahman's eyes filled with tears again. "Read it," he said softly. The letter was from a Dr. Jonathan Cromwell, Chief of Neurology at Manhattan General. It began formally. "Dear Mr. Ali, you don't know me, but you knew my father, James Cromwell. He passed away last year, and among his possessions, I found a series of journals detailing his work at the community center in Louisville. In these journals, he revealed the truth about his relationship with you, a truth he had kept from our family out of shame." I looked up at Rahman in shock. "The son of the man who attacked your brother became a neurologist." Rahman nodded. "Keep reading." The letter continued. "My father wrote that in 1960 he participated in a racially motivated attack on 2 young black men, one of whom he later discovered was you. He described how, years later, you found him working as a bartender. And instead of exposing him or seeking revenge, You showed him kindness that he felt he didn't deserve. He wrote that this unexpected mercy changed the trajectory of his life. According to the letter, James Cromwell had never told his son about the attack until writing it in his journals. What he had told his family was that an anonymous benefactor had given him the opportunity to run the community center, a job that had given his life purpose and had inspired his son to pursue a career in medicine. My father wrote that he spent the rest of his life trying to be worthy of the forgiveness you offered him, the letter continued. He never felt he succeeded, but he tried every day. His greatest regret was never having the courage to tell you his real name or to thank you properly. But the most shocking part of the letter came next. I became a neurologist because of my father's influence, and specifically because of you. He took me to watch you fight Ken Norton in 1976. Afterward, he cried in the car on the way home. I didn't understand why then, but his journals explained everything. He cried because he could see the early signs of neurological damage in your movements, damage that would later be diagnosed as Parkinson's disease. He told me that day that the world needed doctors who could help people like you, people whose bodies betrayed them despite their greatness of spirit. I looked up at Rahman, stunned by the connection. So the son of the man who attacked your brother became a neurologist because of Muhammad Ali's declining health. Yes, Rahman said, but that's not all. Keep reading. The letter's final paragraphs contained the most astonishing revelation. I am writing to you now because I believe I've developed a new protocol for treating Parkinson's disease that might help alleviate some of your symptoms. This treatment is still experimental, funded by a $5 million grant from the Thurston Medical Foundation, but the preliminary results are promising. I would like to offer you the opportunity to be among the first patients to try this approach at no cost to you. The Thurston Medical Foundation, I repeated, recognizing the name. Isn't that? Yes, Rahman interrupted. Robert Thurston, the same millionaire financial advisor who helped Muhammad hide his connection to the community center. He established that foundation in the 1980s. The letter concluded with a phone number and an invitation for Muhammad Ali to contact Dr. Cromwell if he was interested in the experimental treatment. Did your brother ever respond to this? I asked, still trying to process the layers of connection. In this story, Rahman nodded slowly. He did more than respond. He became one of Dr. Cromwell's patients from 1990 until 1997. The treatment didn't cure his Parkinson's, of course, but according to Muhammad's medical records, it did slow the progression significantly during those years. The cosmic symmetry of the story was almost too perfect to believe. The son of a man who had once tried to destroy Muhammad Ali had grown up to develop treatments that helped extend the quality of his life. But there's one more thing, Rahman said, pulling out a final document. This is what I found this morning, what made me decide that this story needs to be told now. It was a letter from Muhammad Ali to Dr. Jonathan Cromwell, dated December 23rd, 1997. Unlike the earlier documents, this one was not handwritten. By that point, Ali's Parkinson's had progressed too far for that, but it was signed with his distinctive, if shaky, signature. Dear Dr. Cromwell, it read, as we conclude my treatment under your care, I want to thank you not just as a patient, but as someone connected to your family in ways few people understand. Your father's journals revealed to you a truth that I had kept hidden for decades, not out of shame, but because true forgiveness doesn't need an audience. The letter continued, each word carefully chosen. What your father never knew, what I never told him, was that his actions in that alley in 1960 gave me something precious. The knowledge that I could face my deepest fears and still remain true to my principles. When I refused to step forward for the draft years later, when I sacrificed my title and the prime years of my career, I drew strength from knowing I had already faced hatred and chosen love instead of vengeance. The work you've done to help patients like me demonstrates that good can emerge from the darkest moments. Your father's worst mistake ultimately created ripples of healing that have touched countless lives through your work. There is no greater testament to the power of redemption than that. The letter concluded with a paragraph that brought tears to my eyes. I believe that the arc of history bends toward justice, but I also believe that arc is made up of individual choices, moments when we decide who we are and what we stand for. Your father made a terrible choice in 1960, but he made a beautiful choice every day after I gave him that second chance. You have continued that legacy. In my mind, there is no greater victory than that. Not in the ring, not in politics, not anywhere. As I finished reading, I looked up at Rahman, who was wiping tears from his eyes. Muhammad never told me any of this, he said quietly. Not about the stabbing, not about finding the man years later, not about being treated by that man's son. He kept it all to himself. Why do you think he never shared this story? I asked. It's so powerful. It could have added another dimension to his legacy. Rahman thought for a moment. My brother understood something most people don't. Some acts of goodness are diminished when they're performed for an audience. He didn't forgive James Cromwell to be praised for his magnanimity. He did it because it was right, and keeping it private made it pure. As our interview with Rahman concluded, we were left with an extraordinary story that reframed one of the most well-documented lives in modern history. But what we didn't yet realize was that this was just the prelude to an even more remarkable discovery, one that would explain why Rahman had chosen now, after all these years, to break his silence. 1 week after our meeting with Rahman Ali, we reconvened at the Muhammad Ali Center for what we thought would be a follow-up interview. The executive director of the center had been informed of our discoveries and had agreed to help us authenticate the documents. But when we arrived, we found not only Rahman waiting for us, but also an elderly white man in a wheelchair. "This is Dr. Jonathan Cromwell," Rahman said, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "He flew in from New York when I told him about our conversation." Dr. Cromwell was in his 70s now, his once dark hair gone silver, but his eyes were sharp and clear behind wire-rimmed glasses. He extended a hand to me, his grip still firm despite his age. "When Rahman called me, I knew I had to come," he said. "There's more to this story, much more, and it's time the world knew the whole truth." We settled into the conference room once again. Dr. Cromwell placed a leather briefcase on the table and carefully removed a stack of documents. "My father's journals were just the beginning," he explained. "After Muhammad Ali became my patient, we developed not just a doctor-patient relationship, but a friendship. He trusted me with information that he kept from nearly everyone else." According to Dr. Cromwell, in the early 1990s, as Muhammad Ali's condition deteriorated, he became increasingly concerned about his legacy. Not his boxing legacy, or even his political activism, but his humanitarian work. Muhammad confided in me that he had been operating a network of charitable initiatives since the 1970s, Dr. Cromwell explained. Most of them anonymously or through intermediaries. The community center my father ran was just one small part of a much larger tapestry. Dr. Cromwell handed me a bound report, a detailed accounting of dozens of projects spanning 5 decades and 6 continents, youth centers in urban America, schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan, medical clinics in Africa, clean water initiatives in Southeast Asia, all funded through a complex structure of foundations and trusts that obscured their connection to Muhammad Ali. He used his considerable wealth, which at its peak approached $300 million, to create what he called his quiet revolution, Dr. Cromwell continued. Most of his high-profile charity work was separate from this. The public appearances, the UN ambassadorships, the named donations. Those were important to him too. But this shadow network was his true passion. Rahman nodded in confirmation. I knew my brother was generous, but even I had no idea of the scale until Dr. Cromwell contacted me last month. Why contact you now? I asked Dr. Cromwell. The elderly doctor leaned forward in his wheelchair. Because of the final project, the one Muhammad set in motion before his death but didn't live to see completed. From his briefcase, Dr. Cromwell removed a USB drive and a sealed envelope. 3 weeks before he died in 2016, Muhammad gave me these with instructions to wait 5 years before doing anything with them. Last month marked 5 years since his passing. The USB drive contained a video, the last coherent recording of Muhammad Ali before his death. His body was ravaged by decades of Parkinson's, but his eyes still burned with the same intensity that had captivated the world since he was a young man declaring himself the greatest. In the video, Ali spoke with difficulty but determination. If you're watching this, I've been gone for 5 years, long enough for the world to move on, but hopefully not long enough to forget. What I'm about to reveal has been my life's most secret work, more important to me than any fight, any title, any recognition. He explained that the sealed envelope contained the details of what he called the Redemption Project, an initiative he had conceptualized after his experience with James Cromwell. The project identified former perpetrators of hate crimes who had shown genuine remorse and secretly funded their efforts to make amends to the communities they had harmed. The idea came to me after I saw how one man's life could be transformed. When given the chance to repair what he had broken, Ali explained in the video, James Cromwell wasn't the only one. Over 5 decades, we identified 87 individuals across America, former Klansmen, reformed white supremacists, people who had committed acts of violence or discrimination and then found themselves haunted by their own actions. According to Ali, each of these individuals was approached discreetly and offered the same opportunity James Cromwell had received, a chance to direct a community initiative that would benefit the very people they had once harmed without public recognition or acclaim. True redemption doesn't happen in the spotlight, Ali said in the recording. It happens in the quiet moments when a person chooses to be better than they were, day after day, far from the cameras and the applause. The envelope contained a list of names, locations, and projects, a nationwide network of community centers, education programs, legal aid clinics, and job training facilities, all operated by people who had once been perpetrators of hate, but who had spent decades working to heal the damage they had caused. Most of these people never knew I was behind their funding, Ali continued in the video. Some suspected, but I never confirmed. What mattered wasn't my involvement. It was their transformation. Dr. Cromwell explained that Muhammad Ali had allocated nearly 40% of his estate to ensure these projects would continue for at least 20 more years after his death. The funds were managed through the Muhammad Ali Foundation, but the specific allocations were hidden even from most of the foundation's board members. He wanted this revealed now because he believed America would need these stories, Rahman said, his voice thick with emotion. He told Dr. Cromwell that 5 years after his death would be the right time, that the country would be facing divisions that might make these examples of redemption and healing particularly valuable. As if on cue, Dr. Cromwell handed me another document, a personal letter Muhammad Ali had written to be released alongside the revelation of the Redemption Project. Unlike the video, which showed the physical limitations of his final years, this letter captured the poetic voice that had made him not just a boxer, but a philosopher. I have seen America at its worst and at its best, the letter read. I have been called a nigger, and I have been called a hero. sometimes by the same people at different points in their lives. What I learned from this is that change is always possible, that the human heart, properly guided, can turn from hatred to love, from destruction to creation. The most important fights of my life weren't in the ring. They were in the hearts and minds of people who started as my enemies but ended as my brothers and sisters in humanity. I won those fights not with my fists, but with forgiveness, not with vengeance, but with opportunity, not with demands for justice, but with invitations to redemption. The letter continued, addressing the future America that Ali would not live. To see if you are reading this in 2021, I do not know what challenges you face. But I know that the path forward will not be found in division or in punishment. It will be found in the difficult daily work of seeing the humanity in those who may not yet see yours, of offering second chances to those who have done harm, of recognizing that even the worst among us contain the seeds of the best we can become. This is not weakness. It takes more courage to forgive than to hate. It takes more strength to offer redemption than to seek revenge. I learned this in an alley in Louisville when 3 men tried to kill my dream with their hatred and a knife. And I have spent my life since then proving that love is the only force powerful enough to transform an enemy into a friend. As Rahman and Dr. Cromwell shared the full scope of Muhammad Ali's secret legacy, I understood why this story had reduced Rahman to tears during that first phone call. This wasn't just a revelation about a hidden incident in Ali's youth or an untold act of forgiveness. It was the unveiling of an entirely different dimension to one of the most studied and celebrated figures of the 20th century. My brother was known for his bold declarations, Rahman said as our interview concluded. He told the world he was the greatest long before the world believed him. But his greatest accomplishment was one he never spoke about, this network of redemption and healing that has quietly transformed hundreds of lives and countless communities. Dr. Cromwell nodded in agreement. Muhammad once told me that the man who attacked him in that alley in 1960 gave him an unexpected gift, the knowledge that what seems like your worst moment can become the seed of your greatest contribution. My father's act of violence eventually led to his redemption, to my career in medicine, and to Muhammad's vision for this larger project. From darkness came light. As we prepared to leave, Rahman handed me one final document, a handwritten note Muhammad Ali had penned in 1985, apparently for his own reflection rather than for publication. They will remember my fights. They will remember my words. They may even remember my struggles, but the work I'm most proud of they will never know, and that's exactly as it should be. True greatness doesn't need an audience. It simply needs to change the world, one heart at a time. In the weeks that followed our revelations, as the story of Muhammad Ali's redemption project spread across the globe, we witnessed something remarkable. Dozens of the project's beneficiaries began to come forward, sharing their stories of transformation. Former hate-mongers who had spent decades quietly working for healing, communities that had been touched by these efforts without ever knowing their true source. The legacy of Muhammad Ali, already secure as an athlete, activist, and humanitarian, was forever expanded. Beyond the loud declarations of greatness that had defined his public persona was this quiet, patient work of healing and redemption that had continued in the shadows for half a century. As Rahman said in our final interview, "My brother's greatest fights weren't the ones the world watched. They were the ones that transformed hatred into love, one human heart at a time. And in those fights, he was truly undefeated. If you made it this far and felt every word, won't you leave without subscribing? I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe, Come be part of this family with me until the next video.